How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is Eric Erickson, the third hour of the program today. Glad to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-7425. I will take your phone calls here shortly. Be patient with me. Got a lot of stuff I need to cover at this moment, including the complete change of game in Ukraine for the United States of America. This news is being overshadowed, of course, by all the machinations about the shutdown and even the terror attack in Great Britain today. But this is a singularly important news. The United States is fundamentally changing its position on Ukraine in a way to give Ukraine greater advantages in fighting Russia. This is an exclusive report from the Wall Street Journal, now confirmed by multiple sources inside the White House today. The story hit the wire last night. Sometimes you got to wait and see if they deny it, but instead they're confirming it. The United States will provide Ukraine with intelligence for long-range missile strikes on Russia's energy infrastructure, American officials said, as the Trump administration weighs sending Kyiv powerful weapons that could put in range more targets within Russia. President Trump recently signed off on allowing intelligence agencies and the Pentagon to aid Kyiv with the strikes. U.S. officials are asking North Atlantic Treaty Organization allies to provide similar support, those people said. The expanded intelligence sharing with Kyiv is the latest sign that Trump is deepening support for Ukraine as his efforts to advance peace talks have stalled. It is the first time, officials say, that the Trump administration will aid Ukrainian strikes with long-range missiles against enemy targets deep inside Russian territory. While the U.S. has long assisted Kyiv's drone and missile attacks, the intelligence sharing means Ukraine will be better able to hit refineries, pipelines, power stations, and other infrastructure far from its border, with the goal of depriving the Kremlin of revenue and oil to sustain the invasion. The U.S. is also weighing deliveries of Tomahawks and Barracudas and other American-made ground and air-launched missiles that have ranges of around 500 miles, other officials said. No decision on what to send, if anything, has been made. The intelligence, combined with more powerful weapons, could have a far more potent effect than Ukraine's previous strikes in Russia, causing greater damage to its energy infrastructure and tying up Russian air defenses. U.S. officials are awaiting written guidance from the White House before sharing the necessary intelligence. This is a massive change in the administration. The missiles, for example, could travel 150 to 280 miles that Ukraine already currently has. A Tomahawk missile could travel 1,500 miles. It's a massive expansion of war footing for Ukraine that has been at the disadvantage that Russian infrastructure outside of Ukraine's point of access has mostly been spared. One of the very few exceptions was the Ukrainian drone attack that was launched because they compromised both a Russian train and also sent a Ukrainian infantry in disguise in vehicles where they were able to launch drones in Siberia to blow up a bombing runway and blow up some bombers. That was the furthest inland attack in Russia, and it was thousands of miles away. Even a Tomahawk missile wouldn't travel that far, but the problem for Russia is that a lot of its oil refineries are in the east, not the west. They are currently outside the reach of the Ukrainians, but with Tomahawk missiles, they would be well within the reach of the Ukrainians. Why does this matter? The third largest oil refinery in Russia was sabotaged 2 days ago. that shrank Russia's oil refinery capacity by a third. It took a third of Russian oil off the market that could not be sold to the Chinese, to the North Koreans, to the Iranians, or to anyone else. It undermined Russia's ability to fund its war. If you take out more, it undermines their ability further. Not only that, but if you're able to target pipelines and you're able to target the power grid, you make the Russian people feel the war. To a large degree, the Russian people have not had to feel the war. There have been occasional incursions into Moscow and other places, but by and large in St. Petersburg and elsewhere, where the bulk of the Russian population lives, they haven't really felt the strains of war. They feel the economic strains of war, but the Russians have now put themselves on a war economic footing. At this point, it would hurt the Russians to stop the war because so much of the Russian economy has now pivoted to a war footing. Everything that is produced in Russia goes to the war. And so people are profiting by the advance of the war. The result is that the Russian government needs to be hit in such a way that the people in Russia feel it. Now, they're soldiers and sailors. They're not coming home. Many of them are dead, and they wonder about that. But generally speaking, the Russians themselves, they're not feeling an impact that they would feel if missiles were taking out the power grid in St. Petersburg and elsewhere. If the missiles were sabotaging the Russians. This is a big, big deal that the Trump administration is changing. Now, what's so interesting here is that the president has long been supported by a group of isolationists in the United States on the right, and they are actually very upset about this decision. They're very upset about what the president's turn is. And one of the big issues is that the president of the United States thought he had a deal with the Russians, and he didn't have a deal with the Russians, and now he's very angry that the Russians don't actually seem to want peace. People around the president told him that they didn't want peace. And the president thought that he was finally going to get the better of Vladimir Putin. Every other American president has been taken advantage of by Putin. And Trump insisted he was not going to be taken advantage of by the Russians. And the result is they have taken advantage of him to prolong their war footing, sell oil to the Indians and more. And now the president's had enough. He is determined that Vladimir Putin is not going to get the better of him. And it's good for us that the president is in that frame of mind. Not only that, but the president is also helping Argentina. Now, these appear to be unrelated, but they're not unrelated. This is Scott Bessent, who was on CNBC.
They couldn't be more false. What we're
Sorry.
Well, first of all, Joe, this trope that we're helping out wealthy Americans with interest down there, they couldn't be more false. What we're doing is maintaining a U.S. strategic interest in the Western Hemisphere. America first doesn't mean America alone.
What is that strategic interest in the Western Hemisphere? If you look at South America, most South American countries are solidifying ties with China and Russia. Argentina is one of the few down there that stands alone in its ties to the United States with Milei as president. And the prior president of Argentina actually had much closer ties to China. In fact, Milei is using those former ties to outsell us to the Chinese in the soybean market. And Bessent is a little bit aggravated with that. This is a little more on him and the soybean problem.
Farmers are getting caught up in the trade dispute. Is there anything the president can do, or what do you expect to happen between the president and President Xi?
Well, there's plenty the president can do, and it's unfortunate that Chinese leadership has decided to use the American farmers, soybean farmers in particular, as a hostage or pawn in the trade negotiations. And American farmers overwhelmingly voted for President Trump. More than 90%. He loves the farmers. He loves them. We have a great Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. 3 of us were in the Oval yesterday, and you should expect some news on Tuesday on substantial support for our farmers, especially the soybean farmers. They've had President Trump's back, and we've got their back.
Now, what's going on here is that Argentina has been able to sell a massive amount of soybeans to China. China is refusing to buy our soybean farmers soybeans, and right now is harvest time. And we've got beans rotting in the fields that can't be harvested because there's no one to sell them to. So what the president is going to do is take all the money from the tariffs, and let's keep in mind here, the tariffs are why we can't sell the soybeans. And all the money that's come from the other tariffs, he's going to give it to the farmers to pay them for the crops that they would otherwise sell to other people. The Chinese are refusing to buy our soybeans because of the tariffs we've imposed on China. And the result is that our farmers are being hurt. This is exactly as people like me warned would happen. And so now the farmers are essentially going, instead of selling their crops, are going to go on welfare at yours and my expense because of the problem with the tariffs. And Argentina, which we're about to help bail out, has capitalized on this, and they're selling to the Chinese. Now, we're not mad at the Argentinians for taking advantage of this. You got to understand why. Because the Chinese were not going to buy our soybeans no matter what. They just happened to find that the Argentinians had an available soybean crop and decided to buy their soybeans because they are refusing. The Chinese will not buy ours under any circumstance. Xi Jinping is using that economic destabilization, if he can, and trying to sow discord between the president and the farmers. So it's a strategic national security decision by the president to give essentially welfare payments to American soybean farmers because the tariffs have caused the Chinese to refuse to buy the soybeans in this trade war. It's kind of aggravating all around, but there we have it. By the way, one more from Scott Bessent, who continues to be one of the best spokesmen for the presidential administration.
Rumors of possible real action taken to do some things permanently during this shutdown within the next 48 hours or so. Can you shed any light on whether that's really going to happen, or was it a bargaining chip for Republicans to get Democrats to agree to keep the government open?
Well, Joe, let's just step back for a minute and look how we got here. Chuck Schumer did the right thing in the spring and led the Senate to a clean CR. What we've got here is the House they have passed a clean CR. The Republicans have the votes in the Senate, and he will not allow his members to come across. And what's changed since then is it's his poll numbers. So the president, Vice President Vance, Speaker Johnson, Leader Thune, they're not negotiating with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. They're negotiating with Representative Ocasio-Cortez because she's nipping at his heels. And, so the American people are being held hostage by Chuck Schumer's poll numbers. And we're starting to see some of the very few moderate members left in the Democratic Party in the Senate drift toward wanting a solution. Chuck Schumer's blocking it. When I look at Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, straight out of Brooklyn, makes me glad that I left New York in 2020. And
yeah. By the way, Schumer may very well get primaried by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because of all this stuff. All right, I'm going to step out. When we come back, I'm going to take some phone calls, and then we got to move on to some of the other news of the day. There's still a lot of news happening out there, and I'll bring you the latest on what we know about the terror attack in the UK as well. Hello there. It is Eric Erickson here, and the phone number is 877-973-7425, and I'm going to go to Robert. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fairly well. I have been watching the Ukraine problem ever since Biden invented it. It suddenly crept up on us back in February a couple of years ago under the Biden administration. Before that, the Obama-Biden administration came in and they let Russia walk into Crimea and take over it.
Right.
Why? What's their fun?
Wait.
Does Ukraine have as a hook into the Democratic Party? The old folks are proto-communists. They would normally be supporting Russia.
Okay.
The new ones don't want to support the war military and build up and all of that.
So,
But
okay,
that's
this
in
is
their
this is
position.
a good question, Robert. I can answer you here, and you have to divide between the governing part and the non-governing part. The governing part within the Biden administration, particularly the American military, in large part wants to contain the Russians. You still have some old Cold War warriors there. That's why Bernie Sanders has kind of noticed he doesn't spend too much time on Ukraine. The far left progressives don't, because they don't really care about Ukraine. But Biden, back in the day, Biden was not a commie. He was incompetent, but he wasn't a commie. And he was surrounded by generals and admirals in the military who aren't commies, who wanted to contain the Russians. And it's part of a larger strategy here. And I do think as Donald Trump really does decide to embrace Ukraine, you're going to see this wild shift in the Democratic Party, where much like they've done with Israel, you're going to see a lot of the Democratic Party start saying, yeah, we need to stay out of this. We should stay out of this. And you'll probably see a lot of people who were more Trump's or Ukraine skeptical on Trump's side come in to defend them. The fact of the matter is, the Russians want their own sphere of influence. They don't want to be part of the West. They don't want to be part of the East. They want to be Russia. They want a sphere of influence, and they believe that Ukraine has natural ties to Russia because if you remember historically, Kyiv came first. The Russians call it Kiev, and the Moscow Russians, they headed from Kiev to Moscow. It was a route from the fall of the Roman Empire to Kiev to Moscow, and they believe that there is a natural integrated relationship historically between the two, though that has long gone, and the Ukrainians of today just remember Joe Stalin tried to kill all their grandparents. Now, I got to tell you about Vision Computer. I saw the other day one of the big box electronic stores is laying people off in their customer service department. They're going to rely more on AI. If you get a computer from Vision Computers, you actually get to rely on a human being. You get to call a special tech number. And within 15 seconds, some human being, not a computer, is going to answer the phone, actually a human being, actually answering the phone, and give you the answers to whatever you've got. You don't know how to do something on your computer? You lost a file on your computer? Something doesn't seem to be working right? They'll be able to track it down, and they'll be able to help you in 15 seconds or less, faster than a Google search. Call them at 404-COMPUTER. Go to visioncomputers.com. They can build a computer for you, upgrade a computer for you. They can be your managed IT service. They can save you money, even more if you mention Eric. Now, listen, here's the thing with Vision Computers. If you have managed IT for your company because you can't afford the in-house IT guy, not only may Vision save you some money, but your employees are actually going to talk to humans instead of robots, and they'll have more incentive to talk to them. And so you'll have more uptime, you'll have more profitability because your company will stay online more. It's an incentive to you. They can help save you money and keep you online. VisionComputers.com or 404-COMPUTE. Any one of you nationwide, take advantage of it. Tell them Eric sent you. Hello, America. It is Eric Erickson here. As promised, I'm going to check in with some phone calls because in addition to being exhausted, these people have been waiting for quite a while. So let's go to Mark. Welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm living the dream, Eric. I hope you are.
I am.
Good. This is kind of a general question, but when you were discussing the Tennessee issue with the folks on the right, now all of a sudden being unhappy with school choice because of the Muslim schools, I enjoy ideological debates, but it drives me nuts when people are not consistent in their argument. Mm-hmm. So I see that on the left, when Biden first came into office and the states bordering Mexico were unhappy with the way the federal government was, handling border control. They wanted to take it upon themselves, and the Biden administration sued and won, saying, hey, state or country defense is a role of the federal government, not the states. And now you see on the left when Trump is using the federal government to enforce immigration with ICE raids in various cities, they're crying foul, saying, oh, this is wrong, you shouldn't be able to do this. How do you go about getting someone to somewhat be consistent in an argument? And again,
I wish I knew. Listen, I agree with you. I hate the just intellectual dishonesty that my own side employs and the other side employs. I try to be consistent. And I try to recognize that there's no such thing as permanence in politics. So if I'm consistent in my ideas, nobody can turn the table on me later with those ideas. Like, look at the filibuster right now, where when the Democrats are in the minority, they think the filibuster is the greatest thing ever. And when they're in the majority, they threaten to get rid of it. The Republicans, they're trying to push the Republicans to get rid of the filibuster right now. That's I guess their end game here now is try to get the GOP to sabotage the filibuster. It is maddening to me on both sides. And the only thing I can think is one of the ways to do it is to hold them accountable for their prior rhetoric on both sides, by the way. On both sides. My view is that if I stake out a position, I think it's the right position. Not because I'm in the majority or the minority. I think it's the right position. And there are too many people on both sides who have become political opportunists who pick a position, and only in picking that position do they determine which side of the aisle they're standing on. Are they in the minority when they do? I want to play this from Joe Kernan this morning on CNBC real quick.
A huge question about how this plays out in the midterms. I mean, both sides have really gone into this making a bet that they're going to be the ones coming out looking better and the other side's going to be coming out looking worse. And we're just going to have to see how this thing ultimately plays out and what those poll numbers look like.
Because it started with, we really want to be able to. It's going to be great. We're going to lay off permanently lay off all these government employees. But then you see J.D. Vance and others walking up. And no one wants to do this. But, we've got other essential services while the government's closed. We got to keep these open. So this is just a necessary thing that, sort of walking back the zeal that it seems like they have for being able to do this. Emily, thanks.
And I think
this is different than other government shutdowns. There's more. I don't know, they all rhyme, but they're not all the same.
Joe Kernan sounds like he's got a cold, and they're trying to get him to go to commercial break, but he's right. This is different, and the Republicans get in, and this is one of my frustrations. I actually do want to fire all the people. And the president keeps telling the Democrats, it's coming. It's coming. I'm having a meeting with Russ Vought today. You got some time. And he's had his meeting with Russ. And now the Politico reports that Russ Vought, assuming the shutdown's going on next week, will be briefing Senate Republicans next week about what might get wound down. Come on, just do it. Do it today. You want to talk about consistency? I have supported every government shutdown in my life in politics going back to the 90s when I was still a kid and the Republicans shut it down under Bill Clinton. I like government shutdowns. You know why I like government shutdowns? How have you felt the government shutdown today? Now, if you're a government employee and you're furloughed, I recognize you have, because you don't have to go to work today unless you're an essential employee. And if you're in the military, you're still going to get your paycheck this week. It's the paycheck in 2 weeks you may not get. But how have you, the rest of you, you don't work for the federal government, how your mail showed up, you went to work, you went home, the federal interstate system worked, it wasn't shut down. Some of you got on a plane and went somewhere and came back. Your life has not been impacted a single bit by the government being shut down. And it is a reminder every time the government shuts down that you don't need a government of the size that we have, because you are totally fine when the government shuts down. Your life is not wrecked on all the TV networks. It's doom and gloom and disaster every time the government shuts down. We're all going to die. No, you're not. You're going to be fine. I want to play this audio for you. This is from Roel Peck. He's a filmmaker. He was on Morning Joe this morning. Listen to this.
Raul, could you talk about what you bring to your work in terms of your native country, your experiences in your native country, what's happening within your native country today to this piece of work and your life itself?
Well, absolutely. I learned very early to distinguish the signs of authoritarianism. I grew up in Haiti, and then my parents went to Belgium, Congo, after the independence, and there too, I started to see those signs of an emerging dictatorship. And I remember seeing my parents whispering in the living room because there are certain things I was not allowed to hear. I saw neighbors looking at us suspiciously. So all those things, and as Alex said, the attacks on justice, the attack on the press, the attack, things that you were allowed to say and not. Mm-hmm. So it's basically a whole population starting to be afraid of everything, including inside their own family. So those signs here in the United States, people are accustomed that we have an institution that could counter that. But we see that those institutions are the first one to be attacked, and they isolate you and they take you one by one.
Now, I'm sorry, but are any of you really scared to say something? To the extent you're progressive and you're scared to say something bad about Charlie Kirk, well, guess what? You were the one who were canceling college kids because when they were 10 years old, they used the F word for a gay slur on Twitter when they were 10 years old. And now they've turned the tables on you and you don't like it. You set the precedent here. But, I mean, are there really people that are that upset? I mean, Jimmy Kimmel came back on television. He didn't lose his job. They're like, this is desperate. This is the end of America. No, it turned out that Disney ABC wanted him to cool off for a few days. It had nothing to do with the Trump administration. There's no tyranny here except the tyranny within the left-wing tribe that won't allow them to say there's nothing wrong here. You may not like the political environment, but somebody won the popular vote in an election, and you scream about democracy being threatened by a guy who democratically won an election. You just don't like that you lost. Brad, you're up next. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Howdy, sir. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Hope you're doing well.
I am. Hope you are.
Yeah, I can't complain except going to work, so,
Yeah.
But I wanted to say credit where credit's due with CNN actually doing their job recently with one reporter holding Chuck Schumer to the fire regarding his past comments involving government shutdowns, as well as seeing a clip of Jake Tapper holding Hakeem Jeffries' toes to the fire, showing the actual part of the bill where it says Democrats allowing Medicare for illegal immigrants and him trying to defend that. So credit where credit's due with CNN actually bringing their Democratic leaders in front of their Democratic constituents to explain themselves.
Yeah, look, I'm glad you said that. I'm very aggravated with Caitlin Collins in her exchange with Scott Jennings. Just completely did not even understand the point he was making, that Jake Tapper explained so great to Hakeem Jeffries. And I see friends of mine who are they're attacking Dana Bash today for her conversation with Mike Johnson. But what they have ignored is that she had a conversation afterwards with Chuck Schumer where she was as probative and pushing him as she was Mike Johnson, which I think that's the idea of a reporter. It's why, for example, Brad, I like Jake Tapper. We're friends. I don't always agree with him. I think he kind of whitewashed the media's role in covering up Joe Biden in his book, but we have a good relationship. Wolf Blitzer as well. I worked at CNN for a number of years. I'm very frustrated with Caitlin Collins. I'm glad they got rid of Don Lemon. But it's why I like going on with Leland Vittert on News Nation, because every time I go on, it's a tough interview. And it's not just tough to me, it's tough to the guy after me or the guy before me. And rarely does he put on the guy on the right or the guy on the left and have them yell at each other. He has the guy on the left and asks some absurdly hard questions, staking out their position and finding the weaknesses of their position. And then he does the same thing to me on my side. And I like those sort of interviews. And I wish there were more reporters doing that. And to the extent that I've seen Dana Bash or Wolf Blitzer or Jake Tapper having on Republicans, asking them questions, and Republicans complaining about the unfairness of the interview, I'm seeing Democrats also complaining about the unfairness of the interview. I mean, the reality is that Speaker Johnson was in the House of Representatives when the Republicans chose to shut it down the last time, and he was on board that shutdown. And now he's the speaker and he's opposed. You should have the ability to ask him to find the consistency in his argument. But the same goes for Schumer and Jeffries, who were in the House and the Senate during those shutdowns and blasted the Republicans for the shutdown. And you should have to ask them, why now? Last time you said anyone who doesn't pass a clean CR is shutting down the government. And now you say it's not us, but we're the ones refusing to do it. And why are you now deviating from your rule? And I think that's where the American media comes in. And unfortunately, too much of the American media is now as tribal as we are. And it's actually a reflection of us. It's not a reflection of them. Most of the media has always been on the left. A lot of them are now way more comfortable advertising that they are on the left and being open about it. I frankly have a lot of concerns with the direction of where CNN is going, where editorially CNN is very much more where MSNBC is, just in tenor and tone. They don't seem as well. They're just as far left in the stories they tell and the stories they choose not to tell. They just aren't as biased on camera. And that's why I've become a fan of this News Nation network that's out there now, is because it is, unlike Fox and CNN and MSNBC, it's got Chris Cuomo and Ashley Banfield, one who worked at CNN and one who worked at MSNBC, but then it's got Leland Vittert and others who worked at Fox, and Bill Shine, who was for years Roger Ailes' right-hand guy at Fox, has been helping them put the network together, and he understands that every single person who comes on deserves a tough but fair interview. And you should be able to probe the weaknesses of each side by playing devil's advocate to them in the arguments. And that's what they do. And I appreciate it so much. And I don't mind being asked tough questions, and I don't mind being called to account for my changes of opinion or my intellectual inconsistency. But there are way too many people now on the left and the right who don't want that. And they believe they're being unfairly maligned and attacked if you point out, well, yesterday you said this and today you're saying this, and those conflict. How do you resolve it? And they're like, you're just a liberal attacking me. No. They want some consistency. And this goes to a larger issue here, that you and I cannot live our lives and businesses cannot compete with each other if the people in charge of government change their mind on a daily basis. How can you decide what is good and bad, right and wrong, forward and backward, when in government today forward is one direction and tomorrow forward is now backward and backward is forward? We've suddenly an opposite day. You can't live your life that way. A business cannot operate and plan out 5, 6, 7 years in the future if the government can change their mind. It's one reason I still believe we have to preserve the filibuster in the Senate, because otherwise every 2 years the government positions are going to be antithetical to each other, and businesses will not be able to operate in a country where in 2 years the law says this and 2 years later that law is repealed and now we have a new law. The filibuster is actually good because it forces greater consensus and slows down the lawmaking in Washington, where Washington is a government of limited powers. And yet Washington tends to believe itself all powerful, but actually the founders were very wise. They gave the Congress 17 things the federal government's allowed to do and said everything else under the sun is the purview of the states, from education to police to health care. And yet Washington wants to throw money at problems and say, well, now we get to control these things. And it doesn't. That's why I like the Supreme Court so much, is because it's willing to say, no, we have to live within the bounds of the Constitution. And if you don't like the bounds of the Constitution, amend the Constitution. But nobody wants to do that either. So, yeah, I appreciate CNN holding both sides accountable, and amen on there needing to be intellectual consistency in America, because I just don't think there's very much intellectual consistency on either side right now. It's all about what can I say or do to get power. And I personally think we need to throw the damn ring back in the volcano and get rid of the power for all of them, because I don't want it used against me or you. Y'all, I say it all the time, and I really do believe it. I am a Christian who actually believes the book. And because I believe the book, I know we live in a fallen world and we're all sinners, and I want as few in charge of me as possible. That's why I believe in small government. So we should get rid of the power and stop trying to beat up the left. Otherwise, they're going to get the power and beat us up. Just get rid of the ring, and none of us can use the power against each other. And we can all live our lives in peace with each other if we stop thinking Washington is an existential threat, depending on who's there or not. We're sitting here in the studio. It's Belinda here who's running the call screening, and Kobe, and we were discussing lunch and how I'm aggravated with Houston's, and they are too, because they don't do to-go anymore. after COVID, and they got rid of their chicken fingers. Like, they used to have the best off-menu items. And it wasn't just the chicken. They had so many great things that were off menu that if you knew you could get them, you could get them. And the chicken fingers they were famous for, they've gotten rid of them. And when I'm in Beverly Hills doing HBO, it's a Houston's, but it goes by another name, and now I can't think of it. Hills, yes. Yeah, it's except it's called like the Beverly Hills Stun or something like that. And yes, and I was out there. It wasn't a year or so ago. I was out there, and you could do the off-menu items there still, and they had the chicken fingers, and you get them. But if it's Houston's branded, they're not, and it's so aggravating. All of the stuff that COVID took the joy out of life, COVID just sucked the joy out of life. And you had a restaurant where you could go and you were a regular and say, I want this item that's not on the menu, and they would happily bring it to you. And now they're like, we don't do that anymore. They don't even do to-go anymore, at least the one by our office. They don't. It's depressing. The stuff that COVID killed. It killed our attention spans, our relationships, our ability to be out and about. The one good thing that COVID has done is now we get to see on display all of the people with severe, crazy mental health issues because they're wearing masks by themselves in their cars. And you're like, that was always a crazy person, and now they just feel comfortable wearing the N95 mask in their car by themselves. And you can avoid them. And it's always when I go to D.C. or San Francisco, it's the good elderly white liberals wearing the mask. And listen, if they're immunocompromised, I'm sorry, but oftentimes you're like, that person's not immunocompromised. They're just a crazy progressive. And I'm okay with them, their masks away from me, not talking to me. That's why you wear a Make America Great Again hat on the airplane and they stay away from you. Now, I got to tell you about Old Glory Bank. They're my bank. Speaking of making America great again, they're making banking great again with Old Glory Bank. They're a bank by conservatives for conservatives, and they would love to have you on board at oldglorybank.com/Eric, oldglorybank.com/ERICK. You can get a no-fee checking and savings account. You can get a mortgage. You can get a CD, car loan. They've got great budgeting options. I saw someone who works for me complaining about his present bank on social media last night. It's one of the too big to fail banks in America. I'm like, oldglorybank.com/Eric. You can even deposit cash at Old Glory Bank with 88,000 retail locations around the country. They're a fantastic team of people, and it's a great bank, and I have a checking and a savings account with them. I really do. oldglorybank.com/ERICK, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply, and I literally thought I had another hour of this program to do, and I actually only have a few seconds.